this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr. Luca.
Could the Prime Minister tell this House whether the outcome of his budget was by design or by mistake? Did he mean to push 100,000 pensioners into poverty with his own analysis when he removed the winter fuel allowance, or was that a mistake? Did he mean to decimate family farming when he changed the inheritance tax, or was that a mistake? And did he mean to tax GPs, care homes and hospices when he raised NICs, or was that a mistake? Prime Minister, could he tell the House, are these acceptable collateral damage in his path for change, or simply a mistake that need rectifying?
I'll tell you what was a mistake, leaving a £22 billion black hole that we had to sort out. We took the difficult decisions, investing in our NHS, and I would have thought he would have welcomed the 2 million extra appointments that we've achieved in the first 7 months of a Labour government. That's the difference our budget is making to people.
Alex McIntyre.
Delighted that Carlton and Grange primary schools in my city of Gloucester will be part of the first 750 schools to get free breakfast clubs. And I'm pleased that this government is already delivering on its manifesto promises in less than a year. So will the Prime Minister agree with me that by helping working parents with childcare and delivering the best start to the day for every single child, we are delivering opportunity for the next generation?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. We're pleased that 2 of the early adopter schools will be in his constituency. Mr. Speaker, we're ensuring that all primary school children aged can get access to free breakfast and at least 30 minutes of free childcare. And that means every child ready to learn, and parents, of course, supported with up to £450 a year back in their pockets. That's the change a Labour government makes.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Bennell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish the Prime Minister every success on his trip to Washington. The visit to see President Trump must serve our national interest. The Prime Minister and I are completely united in our support for Ukraine as a proud and sovereign nation. Yeah. What specific steps will he take to ensure Ukraine is at the negotiating table for any peace settlement?
Well, I thank her for her words about the forthcoming trip. And it is right, and I think the whole House will think it's right, that Ukraine must be at the table at negotiations. There can be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine. That has been my consistent position in all of the discussions that I've had. That will continue to be my position, because this is about the sovereignty of Ukraine and their ability to decide for themselves the future of their country. So they must be at the table.
Kemi Bennell.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for that answer, and as I said, I wish him every success. We want to support him on this issue. So turning to the details of the plan he set out yesterday. Over the weekend, I suggested to the Prime Minister that he cut the aid budget, and I'm pleased that he accepted my advice. Mr. Speaker, it's the fastest response. It's the fastest response I've ever had from the Prime Minister. However, he announced £13.4 billion in additional defence spending yesterday. This morning, his Defence Secretary said the uplift is only £6 billion, which is the correct figure.
Prime Minister.
I'm going to have to let the Leader of the Opposition down gently. She didn't feature in my thinking at all. I was so busy over the weekend I didn't even see her proposal. I think she's appointed herself, saviour of the Western civilization. It's a desperate search for relevance. But, Mr. Speaker, look, if you take the numbers for this financial year and then the numbers for the financial year 27-28, that's £13.4 billion increase. That is the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, which will put us in a position to ensure the security and defence of our country and of Europe.
Mr. Speaker, that wasn't very clear. How is it that the Defence Secretary says £6 billion and he says £13.4 billion? The IFS said today that the government is playing silly games with numbers. How does he find this difference in numbers?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we went through this 2 weeks ago, going through the same question over and over again. So let me say it. if you take the financial year this year, and then you take the financial year for 2027-28, the difference between the two is 13.4 billion. That's the same answer. If you ask again, I'll give the same answer again.
I'll decide when it's more.
Mr. Speaker, someone needs to tell the Prime Minister that being patronising is not a substitute. It's not a substitute for answering questions. It's not a substitute. He hasn't answered. What he has said is different from what he said yesterday. We are still not clear where the money is coming from. We want to support him. He's also said that we should put British troops on the ground in Ukraine. We haven't seen the detail of any proposals. Would his new spending plans allow him to fund this commitment effectively?
Prime Minister.
I mean, I think it's the same question again. It's 13.4 billion. That's the difference between this year and 2020. She asked a serious question about the security guarantees in Ukraine, and that is extremely important, because the worst of all outcomes, if there's to be a cessation of hostilities, is that it is a short break rather than sustained and lasting peace. And I think that that means there's got to be security guarantees. I've indicated that we will play our full part. There has to be US backing, because otherwise I don't think it will deter Putin. We are working on that. I'm having extensive discussions about it, not in a position to put details before the House, as she well knows today, but I'll continue down that route, because I want a lasting peace in Ukraine and Europe for the safety and security of Ukrainians, of Europeans, and of course for everybody in this country.
Mr. Speaker, this is an endeavour that we want to support him in, but we need to know exactly what it is we're supporting. We need clarity and transparency over the money. We also need to know where this money is going. This morning, the Defence Secretary could not say if the Chagos deal would come out of the defence budget. Can he confirm to the House that none of the defence uplift includes payments for his Chagos deal?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the additional spend I announced yesterday is for our capability on defence and security in Europe, as I made absolutely clear yesterday. The Chagos deal is extremely important for our security, for US security. The US are rightly looking at it. When it's finalised, I'll put it before the House with the costings. The figures being bandied around are absolutely wild of the mark. The deal is well over a century, but the funding I announced yesterday is for our capability to put ourselves in a position to rise to a generational challenge. That is what that money is all about, and I thought she supported it.
Speaker, we need to make sure we are supporting a plan that is clear and transparent. Yesterday, the Prime Minister set an ambition for defence spending to reach 3% in the next Parliament. We agree with him, but this could be 2034, almost a decade away. That is too slow. We don't know how he will pay for it. We cannot raise taxes further. We already pay more on debt interest than defence, and everyone in this House would have heard him not answer the last question. So I will ask him again. Is he paying for the Chagos deal with this defence uplift or not?
Prime Minister.
Speaker, I've just dealt with that question. She gave the money announced yesterday is going to our capability to put ourselves in a position to defend the security of our country, Europe and the UK. And she asked about defence spending. She gave what people have described as a rambling speech yesterday when she couldn't say what defence spending should be. We've been absolutely clear. We've set it out, a full, credible, costed plan, and I thought she supported it.
Holly Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware that in coastal communities like mine in East Thanet, people develop cancer earlier, get treated and diagnosed later, and die younger. Can he give the House an update on the plans for the government to implement the recommendations by the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, into tackling poor health in our seaside towns?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for raising this. She's right that cancer patients are waiting too long for diagnosis and for treatment. Addressing healthcare inequity is part of our 10-year health plan, Mr. Speaker, aiming to halve the gap in healthy life expectancy between the richest and the poorest regions. And we're making progress on that already.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I start by wishing the Prime Minister well on his trip to the White House? It won't be an easy meeting, but we're all behind him for our national interest. But it's already clear that under President Trump, we won't be able to rely on the United States, sadly, to help ensure our security against Russian aggression. And that's why we strongly welcome the Prime Minister's decision to increase Britain's defence spending. But Europe must do far more to rearm in the face of Putin's threat, and the UK must lead on that. That's why we back the idea of a new European rearmament bank, so we can finance a big increase in the manufacturing capacity without the need to cut Britain's vital soft power. So will the Prime Minister look at this idea, work across this House and across Europe, so we can make a European rearmament bank actually happen?
Prime Minister.
I'll resist his suggestion that we've got somehow to choose between the US and our European partners. I do not believe that to be the case, and I want to strengthen our already strong relationship with the US, because I think it's vital that we do so. I, of course, want to work with our European allies on defence capability and what more we need to do in relation to capability, coordination and funding. And in the longer term, there is a discussion going on amongst allies as to future funding. We're part of that discussion, and I'm happy to share that with the House as it evolves.
Sir Ed Davey.
I hope he's successful in keeping the US on board with our European allies, and I'm glad he's talking about finance and defence. I think if he was to push this European rearmament bank at the summit on Sunday, the European leaders, I think he'd be pushing an open door. Certainly Prime Minister Tusk is supporting from the Polish point of view. But Mr. Speaker, if I can turn now to domestic matters and the cost of living crisis that's hitting so many of our constituents. Families in my constituency are really angry that Thames Water is sending them bills this April that will cost them £150 a year more. Thames has already let down so many people, whether it's leaking pipes or pumping their filthy sewage into our rivers. A third of customers' bills are already used just to pay the interest on Thames Water's debt, and now it's going to borrow £3 billion more. Isn't it time to stop making people pay for bailing out the vulture funds drowning Thames Water in debt? Will his government just put this firm out of its misery, put it into special administration so we can sort out that mess and the mess that lot left?
Well, he's certainly right about the mess that lot made. We've obviously got the water bill. It's got very strong measures in it, and I think he supports them.
Dr. Rosanna Allen-Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have heard extraordinary rhetoric coming out of Washington in recent